Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. It's been a hot minute since I've been on here, but I thought that for my first video back, I would do my top favorite books of 2016. I don't think I made it to 10, but I do have some really good books that I wanted to share with you. The first one's actually one of the first books that I read in 2016, and that is Beloved by Toni Morrison. I absolutely love this book. I gave it 5 stars, and it's a book that I still remember to this day, and I read it in January of last year. It's about a slave who has a very dark, disturbing past and kind of her journey. I don't really want to say much more than that because I think the beauty of this book is how it unravels and how it's written. It's very poetic, very symbolic, and I highly recommend it. If you don't know if you want to get into Toni Morrison, this is probably not the first book that I would recommend. It's very challenging, but for me it's been the most memorable. And then another book that I read around that time was Wild by Cheryl Strayed. This is her memoir where she hiked the Pacific Crest Trail in California when her mother passed away, and it's a memoir, so it's her journey and why she decided to hike and how the whole hike went for her and what she did afterwards. And I found it to be very raw and emotional and funny at times, and I just really enjoyed it. I think it's one of those rare memoirs where it feels really real even though it's being written in a way to entertain us, if that makes sense. I haven't read anything else by Cheryl Strayed. I've heard that she has 2 other books, a novel and then another like advice book, but I really wish she would do another memoir because I would pick it up in a heartbeat. Another book that I read and enjoyed around that time was Still Alice by Lisa Genova. I absolutely love this book. This book is about a woman named Alice who gets early onset Alzheimer's. This is kind of the story of her discovering that she was diagnosed, how it affects her family, the difficulties that she goes through because she's still kind of young. The book is written in chapters by month, so you kind of see, how her disease is progressing and how it affects her. And it was just, very captivating and heartbreaking, and it really puts you in the mind of a patient that has this disease and what it could possibly be like for them. So I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend this book if you're interested at all in psychiatry or family, or anybody that would want to know what this disease is really like. But yeah, I really love this, and I definitely am going to be picking up whatever Lisa Genova writes next. I also want to go over 2 nonfiction books that I read that I got from the library. The first one is In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. This is the story of a young woman who grew up in extreme poverty in North Korea. When her sister escapes to China, she decides to follow suit, but can't find her. And then in China, there are some situations that she goes through there were very hard to read. She talks about her childhood, how she grew up, North Korea, how they view South Korea. And the story is kind of told in bits and pieces like that until she gets rescued, and then she decides to move to South Korea. And once she's in South Korea, she has to kind of start her life all over, and that's why she decided to write this memoir. I found it very inspiring. She is a survivor and someone that you kind of can't help but root for. So I highly recommend that if you're into memoirs or nonfiction, or are curious about what life in North Korea would be like. The other book I want to talk about is another memoir, and that is When Breath Becomes Air. I absolutely loved this memoir. It's written by a neurosurgeon who gets cancer, and you kind of are following his journey when he discovers that he was diagnosed up to his death. And it was so emotional and inspiring, and he does talk a lot about philosophy, religion, family, love, all of those things, but he writes it in such a poetic way, and then throws in some bits and pieces of science in there, which I love when that happens, so I really enjoyed that one. And then another book that I wanted to mention is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This was another favorite of mine. I had never read this book before this year, this past year, and I really loved it. It's a dystopian novel. This is in some far off future where women have stopped giving birth, and so there's only a select number of women that can still give birth, and they're called handmaids. So this is a story of an anonymous handmaid and kind of how she um, lives through this world and her experiences as a handmaid. And I just found it very interesting. I heard that they're going to be doing a TV adaptation of this, and I'm really excited to watch it. There's a lot of scenes in this book that I think would be really awesome for TV or a movie, so I can't wait for that. But yeah, this is definitely a book that lived up to the hype for me. Next, I have Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. I love this book. I think I talked about it in my wrap up, and I said that if I could ever write a book, I would want to write it like this. This is the story of a Chinese American family living in the Midwest. They are dealing with the loss of their 16-year-old child named Lydia, who has been found dead. And it's kind of a story about grief, how this family handles grief, but more importantly, how the choices of parents, how a parent grows up, um, what choices they make in life can later on affect their children and in what way. And that's what really I felt the book was about. I didn't really feel like this was a book about Lydia's death. It was more about a kind of recounting or going back in time to see how choices in the past can affect the people we love the most in the future or in the present. And so that's kind of what this book was like for me. This was another one that really lived up to the hype. I think it deserves all the praise that it gets, and it's definitely a book that I'm going to be rereading sometime in the future. And then the last book that I want to talk about is The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. I read this near the end of the year, and I absolutely loved it. It's a multi-generational story. It spans decades, and it's very ridiculous at times, but also funny, and there are a lot of characters that really pop out here. The story really centers around one man named Esteban Trueba and three women that surround him, and kind of how their life expands as their family grows, as people die, as their kids grow older, what happens during a revolution, what happens within their marriage. I mean, there's just so much that goes on in this book. I mean, it's really a long-winded, really crazy ride of a story. My only criticism of this is that it felt really long at times. Sometimes it felt repetitive, but it was written beautifully, and I just can't believe that this was Isabel Allende's first novel. I mean, it's an amazing piece of work, and if you love anything by Gabriel Garcia Marquez or any sort of multi-generational story, then I definitely recommend this for you. This is not my first Allende, but it definitely won't be the last. She's amazing. So those were my favorite books of 2016. If you've read any of these and want to gush about them with me in the comments, feel free to leave a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite books of 2016 were, or maybe one book that really impacted you last year. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.